those who are not familiar with Judith, Judith, also known as Byakuren or Byakuren, I don't know how to pronounce it in Buddhist circles, is a Dharma teacher in the Zen lineage of Katagiri Roshi. And Judith was, as many of us now know, instrumental in founding the Clouds in Water Zen Center in St. Paul in Minnesota. So that is Judith according to her profile on her website. And well, let me say two more things. When I was looking up what is Dharma, I just wanted to throw that in because maybe that's also something that Judith then will pick up. According to that, what I read here, Dharma is a concept of central importance in Indian philosophy and religion. It has multiple meanings in Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Jainism. It is difficult to provide a single, concise definition of Dharma, but Judith is a Dharma teacher, as the word has a long and varied history and straddles a complex set of meanings and interpretations. So to make it easy, what Judith does today is to relate what she does as a Dharma teacher with what we know in our programs as Step 7. And Step 7 simply reads, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. I'm really excited to hand it over to Judith and take it away.
This is a fantastic opportunity for me. I enjoy it a lot, and it organizes my thinking in a fantastic way, partially because this is a 12-step group where I can openly talk about Buddhism, and the reverse is this is the Buddhist talk where I can openly talk about the steps. And this has been my life since, when did I come? 1977. So I've had a long history. I've done Buddhism and 12-step side by side from the I started in Buddhism, but very early on, I got sober. And this is just a fantastic opportunity for me to get my thoughts together and share them. So thank you so much for offering this space for my talking. So I have a PowerPoint and I'm going to share my screen. Okay. I don't know how I get rid of this, but I think it's okay the way it is. Oh, maybe I can move this thing over to the other side. Okay. We're going to be talking about step 7, humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. And I just this morning wrote down grace because I wanted to talk about grace. So this is right now in my spiritual life, the most important step. I say that with some hesitation, but I'm very involved in what does step 7 mean to me. And the reason I'm so interested is because of circumstances in my life, difficulties, and because of my age and many circumstances, I'm really wanting to let go of control in the deepest sense and to surrender. What does that word surrender? To the powers that be. So in a sense, that's the Dharma. I'll just surrendering to the Dharma. And for me, the Dharma is inherent, naturally arising. It's the energy of the universe. It comes and there's a balance between unconstructed reality and manifest reality. They work together, they source our life. Nature is a part of that, DNA is a part of that. And when I think of surrender, which is all through the steps, step 3 particularly, we're surrendering to the Dharma. We're surrendering to the natural evolution experience of life. And we, as a human being, as a little flower, as an individual being, is just completely a part of that energy. And the circumstances of our life, our cause and effect within our being, works with this universal, always, everywhere inherent science of life. And sometimes human beings' minds get so clouded up or defiant or delusion or whatever word, addicted, that we aren't in touch with this completely natural evolution of life itself. So part of my, when I use the word God, I don't use it that much, except in 12 step, you need to use it. I think of it as this Dharma universal energy. And one of my teachers from the 13th century, Dogen calls it total dynamic functioning. Zenki is what it is in Japanese. And the other translation for it is very fun, I think. The whole, WHOLE, the whole works. Those are great. So how do you surrender to that and get out of the driver's seat and let your life flow? And I can't do that if my frontal lobe is thinking it knows best and is trying to control everything. And I can't do that if I don't trust that there is this dynamic functioning of the universe and I'm connected to it. So those two things are maybe those are the first three steps in a way. It's very, very important for me to have a connection with this universal intelligence, perhaps you could call it. Sometimes I laugh and I say it's the DNA that's inside my body, that even my body knows better than my mind how to enter the flow of life. So partly the reason I'm saying this is because there was a question about what is the Dharma, but also because I'm kind of embarrassed in a way to have to say this. Can I say the first 40 years in program, I tried to control every goddamn thing. Isn't that sad? And it was hidden because on the surface, I was letting go and letting God. But deep down, I still was trying to control things or to maybe I should say this, fix things or manage things, control and manage and control, and figure out how would my life work best? Or how could Judith Ragir, whom I hated, I just thought I was a scum, really scumbag. And that I learned from my childhood environment. I'm bad, I don't do anything right, I'm fat and ugly, and all the things. I have to be exactly what my parents want. All these things that made me not feel like I was a blooming flower, that there was something wrong with me. And certainly my addictions were, I was going to say, prove them right, but I don't think so. The addictions were the defense mechanism of how to survive, really. So now in program, somehow that has to change. That's a pivot, a deep mysterious spiritual pivot. And there is a lot of doing in program. There are certain steps that one has to do. And then there are certain steps that one has to non-do. And step 7 is one of these steps. Oh, I can't have it over there. So let's go to the next. So the 7-step prayer. This is what is so interesting to me. In the book, big book, on page 76, in the 4th edition, is that page number. There's only one paragraph on step 7, and that paragraph is the 7-step prayer. Now, to me, that's so interesting because everything else has pages of information. Of course, there are pages of information if you go to the 12 and 12, and now, so many years later, there are pages of information. But in the first hit of how to work the steps, step 7 got one paragraph. And I believe that's because it's a non-doing step. It's a mysterious step. It's a step where the universal energies respond to your work and release the tangles, the karmic knots, K-N-O-T-S, we would call them in Buddhism, release those because the dharmic energy really wants to flow and be healed. And it knows how. But we got to get out of the way because our frontal brains don't know how. We don't know. We can't manage and control our way to health. So let me just read the prayer. Maybe if you know it, you could be silent or say it out loud because you're on mute. And maybe we could do it as a prayer. See if our heart can connect to the words, our heart and mind. See if our intention can connect with the words. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in my way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Okay, so in the beginning of program life, I believe there's quite a bit of effort. You got to come to meetings. You have to get a sponsor. You have to become willing to work the steps. And just sobriety alone is hard, as all of you know. How to get through the day without your substance. What do you have to do in order to get through the day without your substance? So in many ways, there's a lot of effort. And what I'm trying to bring forward today in step 7, I think I've talked a lot. Step 4 and 5 is a lot of effort. You have to do it. You have to write it down. You have to find someone. You have to talk to them. It's a lot of effort in those steps. And there's effort in step 6. Oh, that's what I wrote down. So the effort in step 6 is becoming entirely ready. And when we did step 6 last time, I had quite a big chart about how do you become ready. You have to have awareness. You have to know step 4. You have to know what you're bringing to awareness. And you have to have the willingness to interrupt the negative habit pattern. So there's quite a bit of effort, doing, consciousness, bringing to awareness in step 6. However, I feel like step 7 is an effortless step. And up until now, I haven't known how to do that effortless effort. I was such a controller and so overachieving that even within my meditation practice, I was still trying to achieve, I don't know, emptiness or be the best one in the room or, the veil, veil, like a hat veil. There's a lot of veils of um, self-centeredness, and they get subtler and subtler. And this one that I'm working on now is this feeling that I can fix everything. And that's a big I there. And I use 12 steps quite a bit as a self-help improvement. How can I improve myself because I'm so bad? And in a way, that's great. I did improve myself a lot. Yay. But in the end, that is not spiritual surrender. In the end, that is not loving the Buddha within me. Sometimes they call it the child of God. There's a lot of words, but I think because I'm talking Buddhism, I'll just say the Buddha within me, the fact that I'm a being and I'm connected with everything, and there is nothing wrong with me. I just thought of this one thing. Katagiri Roshi, he was a big Zen teacher in America, and he started the San Francisco Zen Center. And he used to go to the grocery, and he would pick out, this is the story, he would go and pick out the bruised peaches and bring them home. And his wife would get angry at him. Why are you bringing me the bruised peaches? And he said, they taste the same. We can cut out the bruises, and they'll make just as delicious a pie. So to work the steps from that place is a little bit different than working the steps from I'm a bad person and I have to get better. And I was just at I think it actually was an OA meeting, and the speaker was a beautiful speaker. Oh my goodness, she worked a really beautiful step. And what she said was, after I've done all the steps, she had been in for a while and had done all the steps. She said, I live in step 6 and 7. And I really never heard that before. I always heard that the maintenance steps were 10, 11, and 12. But when she said that, I really felt like, oh, that is good. Because that means every day, every moment, I'm willing to change my negative behavior patterns. Every day, fresh. I'm willing to humbly ask for the things that block me from being happy, the things that block me from being able to help other people are removed. And then I am willing to manifest that through grace, through letting go, through surrendering to the day as it is. I've been recently studying with a new teacher, and it's called the 9 Bodies. You could look it up if you're interested. It's a combination of Hinduism and Buddhism, and it's about 9 levels of consciousness. And the ninth, the top level of consciousness is called cosmic consciousness. But they say, as a human being's mind cannot understand cosmic consciousness. The highest level of consciousness is a mystery. And many, many religions agree. Like the Quran, you can't have an image of the mystery. You can't say the name. In Jewish, you use the name Yahweh. You don't say the name of God. You have a different name. And step 7 is a lot about the mystery of spiritual healing. And I think that what we're trying to do is be spiritually healed. Even though we can be physically healed, we can be emotionally somewhat healed, in my opinion. But what is spiritual healing? It's a total mystery. And just, I'm going to give one example from my life. Part of my sickness was that I had very severe asthma all through my childhood and up until I was 32. And I came into program, I was 26 or something like that, or maybe later, because I think it was in my 3rd year of program. I had gone through the steps once. I was eating very, very cleanly. I started to do psychosomatic therapy, and I was starting to do sesshin, which is a very intense meditation retreats in the Buddhist style, in the Zen style. So I was doing a lot, and I was seeking a lot during that time. And the first year that I was sober, I was basically insane. I didn't know what to do without my coping mechanisms. I had to go to a meeting every day. I had to hang out with 12-step people. I was pretty much dependent on others the first year, for sure. And I always say, even after 10 years of sobriety, I still think you're kind of a beginner. Sorry about that. After 10 years, you kind of stabilize, I think. But the first 10 years are really, really tough, in my opinion. As an old crone, I'm saying that. Anyway, when I was 32, just to take a long story short, I stopped having asthma. And I knew I was doing all these things, but the actual stopping I felt was spiritual. I felt like whatever was knotted up in my chest had gotten released through all these different layers. It wasn't just 12-step, it was large amount of meditation. It was going to a psychosomatic psychiatrist. It was a lot of different things. But the moment that it happened, it was not controlled or managed by me. I did not fix it. It was a mystery. And I still think about it as a mystery. So all the steps that are based on surrender are really about spiritual letting go of control and offering your life to this universal flow, the law of the world, science, however you think of it. So the surrender steps for me are 2 and 3, step 7 and step 11. And I used to say the maintenance steps were 10 and 12, but now I added steps 6 and 7 and 11. Okay, what are the affects of effortlessness or surrender? So I'll just read these. Ease, surrender, naturally arising, softening, available, allow, release, kind intention, underdoing, aligned with our values, slowed down, not in a hurry. And again, I think this is the first time in my life that I'm even close to trusting on this level. And it comes from hardship. Like, I think my son had a cancer the last 6 months. For those of you who have been following me, and he is now out of his treatments. He's on observation. And even though he doesn't feel that well, he's he's cancer free at the moment. So yay. But that challenge really knocked the socks out of me. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't control it. I couldn't manage it. I couldn't determine the outcome. I couldn't love my son the way I wanted to love him. It really, I was out of control. And because I've done a lot of 12-step work, I've done a lot of Zen work, I had the tools in the background to let it happen. That's what I think is the 7th step, is letting it happen. Letting yourself change. That almost makes me cry. I never thought that I would not be a compulsive person. That compulsion is that energy of compulsion, that energy of I have to, that energy of I have to fix this. I never thought that would leave me. Never. I used to joke. I still do joke. What would it take for someone to call Judith Ragir mellow? And then I would laugh, and all my friends would laugh, because I had this energy almost all the time. You know, even in I taught Zen for 30 years. Even in the teaching, although I was a good teacher, my students got a lot, I'm not putting myself down. I'm just saying, even there, I didn't totally let go. And that was the extent that I wasn't really a good Zen teacher. You know, the 8% where I was still trying to manage and control, or still trying to get what Zen is about. So all of a sudden now, I'm feeling like I actually am starting to get some of these qualities in myself. Okay, I'd like to do an exercise about this. It's just using your hands, and it'll just take a few minutes. So if you wouldn't mind, please do this with me. So decide your dominant hand. I'm a righty, so my dominant hand is right. And my left hand, I'm just going to put down like this. And then I'm going to put my right hand on top of my left hand. I got this exercise from Philip Moffitt. And just let your dominant hand rest on the other hand. And don't do anything. Just let it rest. And now take the dominant hand and kind of push or get your hand to go someplace. And feel what that feels like. The dominant hand leading. And then just come back and go back to resting the dominant hand on the other hand. And what Buddhists call this is resting attention. Resting your attention on the object. And sometimes the object is just things as they are. That we would rest our attention on what's arising in the present moment. And that doesn't have to do with making something happen. So I'm really trying to talk about the slogan, let go and let God, on the deepest level, almost an existential level I'm talking about. And Buddhism often goes to that level, if I may say. And I've been going to this retreat with the 9 Bodies people, and we were, maybe the 5th day of the retreat, so deep in meditation, and we're going through the different levels of consciousness. And all of a sudden, one of the teachers, Dana, who I love, she said, "Could you try half as much?" And I thought, oh my God, we're in the 5th day of retreat. And she's still asking us to try even less. Okay, so then I could tell where I was trying to find, whatever body I was in. So I just let go and I just sat there with resting attention or being available to whatever is arising. And then about 5 minutes later, she said, "Could you try half as much, even less?" And I kind of laughed because I already thought I was trying less. And still, it's like my shoulders are up and I still could relax even more. So, but I don't see the whole screen. I'm just hoping that you guys are following me. All right, let's go on. Oh. So let's talk about, I know we have talked in the past about what does the shortcoming mean? What does the character defect mean? And one of the great synonyms, is that the right word, I've been hearing in program lately is maladaptive coping mechanisms. These are coping mechanisms I learned as a child and learned in adulthood that actually don't help me cope and sometimes make it worse. And what I also think of as these defects of character, they're also my defense mechanism. Because for me, I don't know if this is true with everyone, but I'm just talking about my own experience, strength, and hope. My experience as a child was I was very unsafe. I was emotionally and physically unsafe almost my entire childhood. And I developed healthy defense mechanisms. If I didn't have these defense mechanisms, I would have died, or I would have ran away, or I would have ended up on the street even more than I did. These were defense mechanisms that got me through traumatic experiences. And now I don't have to look at these so-called defects of character, even what I was saying negatively about my teaching life. I don't have to think about them in a mean way. I don't have to think about them in a hateful way. I can say those defense mechanisms I had were survival mechanisms, but I don't need them anymore. I'm in a safe environment right now, for the most part. I mean, our society isn't particularly safe, but for the most part, the traumas of my past are not currently happening. And for the most part, because of my spiritual practice, I don't have to defend myself. I can be available and open to what is actually happening. And this is from, I think, the big book. When we notice our fear, and I could say when we notice our defense mechanism, we ask God to help us place our mind on what God would have us do. Direct us to what she would have me be. And one of the older women in my Al-Anon group always says over and over, She has a beautiful program, wonderful program. She said, I'm moving from the field of fear to the field of love. So is that what step 7 is for me now? Step 6 is noticing when I'm in my defense mechanisms, acting out of fear, doing things that are self-destructive for me or for others, and then coming to my heart and saying, will the universe please help me come from love? And how would that change what's happening right now? So Buddhism has some things to say about love. And what I think is kind of funny is that when I first started Zen with Katagiri Roshi, I would constantly raise my hand and say, well, where is love? Where is passion? And he would be quite dismissive and say, that's just human sentimentality, because he really wanted me to see the existential, unconstructed reality that is underneath and the source of all life. So he didn't want me to hang around in sentiment. And that's a very classic, and if I may say, patriarchal view of Buddhism. And I'm very involved right now in bringing this forth in the Buddhist community, that we can change the value system in Buddhism according to what the 21st century needs. And one of them is to heighten the arm of compassion in Buddhism. So Buddha has 2 arms. One is wisdom and one is compassion. But I kind of feel there's a bias always towards wisdom or emptiness, or a bias against families, against wholesome sexuality, against relationships. So it was very interesting for me to find the divine abodes. Now, the divine abodes are talked a lot more about in Tibetan Buddhism and also in Vipassana insight Buddhism, but they're not as much talked about in Zen. Although now, 21st century, I think this is changing. And I think it's because there's a lot of women teachers that is coming through. But anyway, the divine abodes are, if you are in the field of the Buddha, these qualities would naturally and inherently be how you relate to manifest reality or the form world. And these are the 4 divine abodes. They're different names for it. The 4 immeasurables, sometimes people call it, because they're infinite. And also Brahma Viharas is the name. I wonder, in Pali, I would imagine that's Pali. So anyway, the 4 are loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And it's interesting, in the Tibetan world, they put equanimity first, and then loving kindness, compassion, and joy. So that's an interesting little switch up. Loving kindness is the inherent kindness of the order of the universe. And this is, usually we think that the icky part of life is the center, and you have to change to be good. But in Buddhism, it's the opposite. The Buddha nature is inherently wholesome, follows the laws of nature, and it's the egotism of the human brain that creates the suffering in the world. So loving kindness is the inherent quality of the Dharma, we could say. Compassion is turning that inherent quality towards human suffering. We can have compassion. And I'll just say there are two, if I can remember them, what they call near enemies of compassion. One is being overwhelmed. Like when I read the newspaper, I'm often overwhelmed, even if I'm trying to have compassion for the deep suffering of the world. So when I feel overwhelmed by suffering, I have to switch to a different abode. I could switch to equanimity, or I could switch to joy to balance out my overwhelm of the suffering in life. And the other near enemy of compassion, and I guess I think these are important, like maybe I could have written them down. The other one is pity, is when you think you're better than someone, you're up here and you try to fix the person who's down there. And this could apply to sponsorship or many things where we think we are higher than the person who's suffering, rather than just really relating as two human beings to how difficult it is to live a life that's peaceful or equanimous. I think joy is really important as a traumatized person and as a person who's had a lot of addictions. I tried to find joy in all the wrong places, and really I felt like I didn't have any joy in my life, or I wasn't allowed to be joyful. So it's a big deal for me to allow myself happiness or joy, even if it's temporary, even if it's just going for a walk. Right before I got on this call, I went for a walk around the block to lighten up myself, to gladden my mind. So when I came to this talk, I could come from a more light place in myself. And equanimity is having the stability of spirituality, the root where I can find my serenity, whether things are going my way or things aren't going my way. They sometimes call it the vicissitudes of life, that I'm able through spiritual practice, a lot of practice, to accept things as they are and to be able to cope, going back to coping mechanisms, to be able to cope with the highs and lows of my life. One of the slogans for equanimity is, may I be at peace with the highs and lows of life. Oop, I didn't do the last. So on step 11, we meditate to try and get a little taste of the Buddha mind, a hint of a hint of the Buddha mind. And the Buddha mind will appear as quiet, settled, radiant, pliable, still, satisfied. Philip Moffitt often says the Buddha mind is satisfied with the way things are. That's unbelievable, right? But it's a little bit like the Serenity Prayer, isn't it? I pray for the serenity to know what I have to accept, to know what I can change. So another aspect is humbly asking. So I think I talked about prayer one of the last times I was here, but I'll just repeat it. So if there's no centralized God, if there's no a white beard, usually it's a man riding on a cloud, and I get down on my hands and knees and pray to that being, and that being has a direct line to me. That's very comforting. I wish I was a Christian, because I want to be comforted that there's a God taking care of me. But in Buddhism, there's no centralized God. There is this key intelligence. There's the intelligence the unbelievable mystery of life. Like even right now, I always say this, but in our bodies, it's totally mysterious. The heart is pounding, the nervous system's working, even language is a mystery. Some of you probably this English is your second language. Whoa, that's incredible. So this total dynamic functioning of life is always around and it's always there for us to connect to. And Katagiri Roshi would call prayer call and response, cause and effect. So when I call out, when I humbly ask, that's a call to the universe. Please help me soften up. And I just call out. That's my job, to call out. And Katagiri Roshi said, the universe will respond because cause and effect are the noble ancient law of manifest reality. And I like it says in the 12 steps, right? It says quickly or slowly. I don't know when that call will be returned. I didn't know that I would have to be 46 or 7 years sober before I learned how to let go. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But we do call out. We humbly ask. And that is something that this new teacher, Philip Moffat of mine, says. He overemphasizes, and I think we need to overemphasize it because of our culture. He overemphasizes humbleness, modesty, humility, and he says you can get this spirituality just a tiny amount, a hint of a hint, he says. And then let your mind be satisfied with a hint of a hint. And that satisfaction will settle you down. I'm coming near to the end. So I do think that the effort part is that we have a steadiness of our intention. So in Buddhism, this is called right intention or wise intention, that we keep our attention on the willingness to allow something different to happen. Fearlessness, because right now I'm kind of afraid because I don't know what my future, I don't know when we'll move to LA. I don't know if we'll buy a house or rent. I don't know how hard it will be to take apart our house. I don't know if my son will be through cancer or not. I really am in a place where I don't know the future, and I'm trying not to manage it. I'm trying to go day by day, one day at a time, do what I think is best, have a steadiness of intention. And if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I need to do different coping mechanisms. And most of those coping mechanisms now need to be spiritual because my other ones didn't work. Like going out and having a chocolate croissant and a latte, although temporarily I have a good time. But in the long run, that has no effect on the depth of my overwhelm that I'm feeling right now. But God or the mystery or prayer or meditating or going for a walk, a spiritual walk, those actually have calmed my heart mind down. Oh, it looks like I have one more slide. And I'm just going to read this. And this is what I mean by step 7 is done to you. It's a kind of grace. And it's built on all the effort of the other steps. But it's not, you are not in charge. I am not in charge spiritual healing is a mystery that happens to me when I'm pretty conscientious, when I have a steadfast intention to do my 24 hours spiritually. And we have the instructions in the big book, what you do in the morning, what you do during the day, and what you do at night. And in your day, you need to include prayer and meditation. And you need to include, I think the 10th step is kind of a psychological examination of how you doing. So here we go. Our whole system inherently wants to go towards integrity and wholeness. Our whole system wants to be healed, and our whole system knows how to do it. Our DNA knows how. And in some senses, we have to get out of the way of our whole body mind, returning to equilibrium, dropping the trauma body, the body of our defenses and reactions, and allowing the chi body to flow and heal us. I came to believe that a power greater than myself, ourselves, could restore us to sanity. Okay. Well, that was a lot. And I like to say, oh, it makes me cry. This is absolutely on the edge of my spiritual life, what I said today. It's very deeply meaningful to me. And I feel very grateful that I got to share it with you.